What happened next?
He moved the knife and slit her throat. He started walking towards me.
Did you say anything to him?
Yes.
What did you tell him?
I told him I'd be quiet. I promise I won't say nothing. I'm not making the noises. It's Katie. He said, move your hands.
And why did he say move your hands? Will you show us how you had your hands?
I had him up like this.
Can you tell us why you had your hands up close to your neck?
Because I saw what he did to Katie and I was scared he was going to do it to me. I was allergic to my throat. I just laid there and pretended I was dead.
Tell us why you did that.
Because if he knew I was alive, he would have came back and killed me for sure.
The first time I killed somebody, man, it was such a rush.
Tommy Lynn Sells, born on June 28, 1964, in Oakland, California, ultimately became one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, earning the chilling title of the Coast-to-Coast Killer. His life, riddled with chaos and violence, serves as a tragic tale of a man who evolved into a predator, embodying the darker elements of human nature. Despite being convicted of only one murder, Sells claimed to have killed upwards of 70 people throughout his murderous spree, a haunting assertion that forensic experts and law enforcement have grappled with for decades. Sells' early years were steeped in turmoil and instability. Born to an unwed mother, he was one of 5 children, each struggling to find their footing in a fractured family dynamic. His presumed father, Joe Lovins, died when Sells was just 11 years old, leaving a profound void in his life, one that would contribute to the emotional scars he carried into adulthood. The death of his twin sister, Tammy, from meningitis when they were only 18 months old cast a long shadow over his childhood. This early exposure to loss and abandonment instilled in him a sense of grief that would shape his worldview and ultimately influence his violent tendencies. At the tender age of 5, Tommy was sent to live with his aunt, Bonnie Walpole, in Holcomb, Missouri. However, this arrangement was short-lived, and he was returned to his mother when she discovered that Walpole wanted to adopt him. The instability continued as Sells found himself in a home rife with neglect and chaos. By the age of 7, he had begun drinking alcohol, pilfering from his grandfather's hidden supply. This early introduction to substance abuse was merely the beginning of a downward spiral that would lead him to a life characterized by crime and violence. As he grew older, Sells became increasingly troubled. By the age of 10, he was using narcotics, and by 12, he exhibited increasingly erratic behavior that would eventually lead to his first arrest. A particularly disturbing incident occurred when he was banned from his grandmother's house after he entered her bed while she was sleeping, an act that foreshadowed the depth of his troubled psyche. Shortly after this, his mother and siblings abandoned him, leaving him to fend for himself in an unforgiving world. In a fit of rage during his youth, he shot a woman, though she survived the attack. This incident marked the beginning of his life as a nomad, a life characterized by instability, violence, and a growing detachment from societal norms. From 1978 to 1999, Sells hitchhiked and train-hopped across the United States, committing various crimes along the way. He held a series of short-term jobs, but was often fired due to his substance abuse issues and erratic behavior. In 1990, he stole a truck in Wyoming and was sentenced to 16 months in prison. During this time, he was diagnosed with multiple personality disorders, including antisocial and borderline features, as well as severe substance use disorders. Yet, these diagnoses did little to deter his violent tendencies and criminal behavior. The climax of Sells' violent life came in 1992 when he targeted Fabian Witherspoon in Charleston, West Virginia. Witherspoon, then 19 years old, had no idea she was about to encounter one of America's most notorious serial killers. Sells, panhandling under an overpass with a sign that read, "I will work for food," caught her attention. Feeling sympathy for him, she invited him into her home, asking him to wait outside while she prepared some food. However, Sells had other plans. By the time she returned, he had entered her house and was lying in wait. When Witherspoon turned her back, Sells attacked, grabbing a knife from her kitchen. He trapped her in the bathroom, attempting to rape her. In a desperate struggle for survival, Witherspoon fought back fiercely, hitting him repeatedly with a ceramic duck. In the process, she managed to stab him, nicking his kidney and liver, and slicing one of his testicles. Witherspoon later recounted, "I just wanted to get away, and I didn't realize I had stabbed him. It was very, very, very hard to know that I had the capability of hurting someone like that." This brutal encounter left Sells injured and desperate. He retaliated by beating Witherspoon over the head with a piano stool before fleeing the scene. Despite her injuries, Witherspoon survived the attack, becoming one of only 2 known survivors of Sells' violent rampage.
My name is Fabian Witherspoon, and I'm a survivor of Tommy Lynn Sells. The more I found out of the horrific things he did to people, the more I had some survivor's guilt to also think that I survived and all those other people didn't. It was a lot to take in. I've learned not to be ashamed anymore of my story, not to hide from it. I would like to say to not just women, anyone, you can't trust everyone. You can feel sorry for them, or you can have sympathy or empathy, but don't be so naive and trusting. If you are in a situation like I was in, make sure that you come out on top and that they don't win and that you survive. Don't be afraid to tell your story, because your story could change even one person's life. Take control, own it.
Sells, on the other hand, was apprehended and taken into custody, ultimately serving 5 years in prison for the malicious wounding charges. During his incarceration, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and married Nora Price, but their union was short-lived, and he resumed his life of wandering upon his release in 1997. The first confirmed murder committed by Tommy Lynn Sells occurred when he was just 15 years old. He claimed that he killed a man in Mississippi during a robbery, though the details of the crime remain murky and unverified. This act marked the beginning of a decade-long killing spree that would leave a blood-soaked trail across multiple states. Sells became a predator, targeting vulnerable individuals who would fall victim to his sadistic desires. On July 5, 1979, Sells committed his first confirmed murder when he shot John Cade during a home invasion in Port Gibson, Mississippi. Cade, a young man in his 20s, had returned home from a night out when he encountered Sells, who was armed and waiting for him. In a violent altercation, Sells shot Cade execution style, leaving his lifeless body behind in a gruesome scene. This act of violence set the tone for the series of murders that would follow. In April 1982, Sells was implicated in the murder of Joanne Tate in St. Louis, Missouri. Tate, a mother of 2, was attacked in her own home. Sells entered the residence under the pretense of seeking help. Once inside, he brutally assaulted and murdered Tate, whose body was discovered days later. The case remained unsolved for years until Sells confessed to the crime while in prison. In July 1985, Tommy Lynn Sells crossed paths with Anna Court at a carnival in Springfield, Missouri. Anna, a young mother in her 20s, was looking for an escape from her mundane life and was drawn to Sells, a man who exuded a certain charisma that masked the darkness within him. After meeting him at the carnival, she invited him to her home, a decision that would ultimately lead to a nightmarish encounter of unimaginable horror. Once inside her modest residence, Sells' demeanor shifted. The atmosphere of casual friendliness quickly transformed into one of tension and impending violence. Anna's 5-year-old son, whom Sells saw as a mere obstacle to his malevolent intentions, was unknowingly caught in the crosshairs of an impending tragedy. Under the guise of needing a place to rest, Sells meticulously planned his assault. In a shocking burst of violence, Sells grabbed a blunt object, a baseball bat that belonged to Ana's son, and struck her viciously, shattering the tranquility of what had been an ordinary summer evening. The brutal assault left Ana reeling from pain and confusion as Sells relentlessly attacked her, a reflection of his complete and utter disregard for human life. The sounds of the carnage echoed through the house, and in those harrowing moments, the young boy entered the room, drawn by the commotion. Sells, now fully engulfed in his bloodlust, did not hesitate. He turned his wrath on the innocent child, striking him down in a senseless act of brutality. In just a matter of minutes, he had extinguished the lives of both Ana and her young son, leaving their bodies behind in a scene filled with unspeakable horror. In the days that followed, the discovery of their bodies sent shockwaves through the Springfield community. Neighbors, initially drawn to the court home by the sounds of laughter and the familiar presence of a young mother and her child, were now engulfed in disbelief and sorrow over such a tragic and violent loss. Law enforcement officials quickly mobilized, pouring resources into the investigation of the double homicide. However, the brutality of the crime left them with very few leads, and the absence of witnesses placed the investigation on a precarious path to uncertainty. As Sells continued his journey across the country, the ramifications of his violent act lingered like a malignant shadow. He moved from one town to another, leaving behind a trail of devastation, yet the court case remained etched in the minds of those affected. The local news ran segments on Ana and her son, and the community mourned, seeking answers, a sense of closure that would ultimately evade them. In another chilling account, Sells confessed to killing a young woman named Suzanne Corks in Lockport, New York, in May 1987. Corks, who was last seen leaving a nightclub, vanished without a trace. Years later, Sells admitted to murdering her, claiming that he had lured her away from the club. Her body was ultimately discovered in a nearby area, but the details of her death remained shrouded in mystery. Sells' murderous spree continued with the Dardeen family murders in 1987. Keith Dardeen was shot execution-style in front of his family, while his pregnant wife Elaine and their 3-year-old son, Peter, suffered horrific fates. Sells' chilling accounts revealed the depths of his depravity. He claimed to have entered the family's home and killed them all in a fit of rage, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. As he traveled across the United States, Sells continued to claim victims, often targeting young women and children. He confessed to the brutal slayings of women across various states, each account more grotesque than the last. His chilling admissions included torturing and killing hitchhikers, young girls, and others who crossed his path. Each confession dripped with sadistic pride as he recounted the details of his heinous acts, seemingly reveling in the terror he instilled. The darkness within Sells culminated in a brutal act on December 31, 1999, when he attacked Kayleen Harris, just 13 years old, in her home in Del Rio, Texas. He broke into the house and unleashed a torrent of violence, sexually assaulting and murdering Kayleen, stabbing her repeatedly. Sells then turned on her 10-year-old friend, Crystal Searles, who fought for her life against the encroaching darkness. Miraculously, Crystal survived, becoming a beacon of hope amidst the horror, and her bravery led to Sells' capture.
He grabbed the knife and slit her throat. He started walking towards me.
Did you say anything to him?
Yes.
What did you tell him?
I told him I'd be quiet. I promise I won't say nothing. I'm not making the noises. It's Katie. He said, move your hands.
And why did he say move your hands? Will you show us how you had your hands?
I had him up like this.
Cut her throat and
Tell us why you had your hands up close to your neck.
Because I saw what he did to Katie and I was scared he was going to do it to me. Over the ledge and my throat, just laid there and pretended I was dead.
Tell us why you did that.
Because if he knew I was alive, he would have came back and killed me for sure.
On January 2, 2000, law enforcement apprehended Tommy Lynn Sells, a man whose life had been a tapestry woven with threads of violence and despair. As investigators delved into his past, they began to unravel the chilling confessions, each one more grotesque than the last. Sells was housed on death row in the Allen B. Polunsky unit near Livingston, Texas. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice received him on November 8, 2000. Over time, police began to suspect Sells of working the system by confessing to murders he had not committed. His confessions flowed like a river, a twisted tapestry of lies and truths woven together to create a narrative that only he could unravel. He claimed to have killed numerous individuals, including women and children, yet many of these confessions could not be corroborated. Investigators were left to sift through the chaos, trying to piece together the truth from the web of deceit. As Sells awaited his fate on death row, he became a figure of morbid fascination. Books, documentaries, and articles explored the depths of his depravity, each seeking to understand the motivations behind his monstrous actions. He became a subject of psychological studies, with forensic experts attempting to dissect the mind of a killer who had so thoroughly evaded the grasp of justice for so many years. On January 3, 2014, a Del Rio judge set Tommy Lynn Sells' execution date for April 3, 2014. In the months leading up to this date, the media coverage surrounding Sells intensified. Documentaries, news articles, and crime shows featured segments on his life and crimes, revisiting the chilling accounts of his numerous victims and the harrowing experiences of those who survived his attacks. The public was riveted by the story of a man who had traversed the country, leaving a trail of death and devastation in his wake. As the execution date approached, Sells remained largely quiet, though he had spent years crafting his narrative, spinning tales about his supposed victims and boasting of a body count that left investigators bewildered. He had become a master manipulator, often boasting about his crimes while simultaneously evading the full weight of justice for many of his victims. Despite the sheer volume of his claims, many remained unverified, leading to an ongoing investigation into the true extent of his murderous spree. In the days leading up to his execution, Sells was visited by various individuals, including spiritual advisors and family members. He maintained a stoic demeanor, often reflecting on his life and the choices that had led him to this moment. For those who had been affected by his heinous acts, the execution represented a moment of reckoning. For the families of his victims, it was a long-awaited closure, albeit one that could never fully heal the wounds inflicted by his violence. On the day of his execution, April 3, 2014, Tommy Lynn Sells was transported to the execution chamber in the Polunsky unit. As he arrived, a small group of witnesses, including law enforcement officials, victim advocates, and members of the media, awaited the grim proceedings. Among those present were family members of his victims, each carrying the weight of grief and loss. They had come to witness the final chapter of a man who had brought them so much pain. As the execution team prepared for the procedure, a palpable tension filled the room. The witnesses knew that they were present for a significant moment in history, a moment that would mark the end of a man whose life had been defined by violence. Many of them had spent years grappling with the aftermath of his crimes, and this execution represented a chance to confront the monster who had wreaked havoc on their lives. When asked if he had any final words, Sells coldly replied, "No." This stark refusal to acknowledge his victims or express remorse for the atrocities he had committed was emblematic of the man he had become, a man who had reveled in chaos and destruction throughout his life. As the lethal dose of pentobarbital was prepared, the atmosphere in the chamber grew increasingly tense. Those who had come to witness the execution were steeled for the moment that would finally bring an end to the terror that Sells had inflicted on so many. As the execution team administered the lethal injection, Sells took a few deep breaths and closed his eyes. Within moments, he began to snore, an eerily calm end to a life so filled with violence and horror. 13 minutes later, at 6:27 p.m. Central Daylight Time, he was pronounced dead. The process was swift, and for many, it represented a long-awaited justice, albeit one that could never erase the scars left behind by his gruesome legacy. In the aftermath of his execution, the legacy of Tommy Lynn Sells continued to reverberate through the communities affected by his crimes. Survivors like Fabian Witherspoon and Crystal Searles became voices of resilience, sharing their stories in hopes of raising awareness about the lasting impact of violence. Witherspoon, who had fought back against Sells during her attack, spoke publicly about her experience for the first time, emphasizing the importance of survival and strength in the face of unimaginable terror. She had not known, at the time of her assault, that she was battling a serial killer. Her determination to escape with her life had ultimately saved her, and she became a symbol of hope for those who had suffered similar fates. Crystal Searles, the young girl who survived Sells' brutal attack on Kayleen Harris, also found the courage to share her story. Her experience, filled with trauma yet underscored by a remarkable will to survive, resonated with many. The bravery that she displayed during that fateful night not only led to Sells' capture but also served as a reminder of the human spirit's resilience. She became an advocate for victims of violence, using her voice to speak out against the horrors that many endure in silence. The investigation into Sells' confessions continued long after his execution, with law enforcement officials striving to corroborate the numerous claims he had made about his alleged victims. Many of the names he mentioned remained largely unverified, leaving a haunting cloud over the families of those he claimed to have killed. The inability to provide closure to these families became a source of frustration for investigators, who felt that Sells had manipulated the system to his advantage. Sells frequently claimed to have killed individuals across a multitude of states, ranging from Texas to California, and from North Dakota to Florida. His confessions often included details that seemed plausible but lacked the specific verifiable evidence necessary to confirm his claims. Investigators worked tirelessly to tie together his statements with existing unsolved cases, but the sheer volume of his admissions made it difficult to discern fact from fiction. One particularly haunting case involved the disappearance of several young women in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Sells claimed to have abducted, raped, and murdered several girls, yet law enforcement struggled to connect his confessions with concrete evidence. One of the most tragic cases he alluded to was that of a 14-year-old girl named Mary Beatrice. According to Sells, he had picked her up while she was hitchhiking. He claimed that after assaulting her, he had driven her to a remote location and murdered her, disposing of her body in a nearby river. Despite extensive searches, no evidence of Mary's body was ever located, perpetuating the pain for her family. Another case that haunted investigators was the disappearance of a young woman named Angela Miller in 1991. Sells confessed to having met her at a bar and lured her to his vehicle, where he brutally assaulted and killed her. He provided descriptions of the area where he supposedly dumped her body, but search efforts yielded no results. The families of these young women were left to grapple with the uncertainty of their fates, forever haunted by the possibility that Sells was telling the truth. He became a subject of psychological studies, with forensic experts attempting to dissect the mind of a killer who had so thoroughly evaded the grasp of justice for so many years. His life became a case study in the nature of evil, prompting discussions about the psychological, societal, and environmental factors that contribute to the making of a serial killer. The media portrayal of Sells also contributed to the public's fascination with his story. His confessions, often characterized by a disturbing mix of bravado and detachment, painted a picture of a man who reveled in the fear he instilled. Sells was often described as charismatic, a quality that allowed him to manipulate his way into the lives of his victims. This duality, the charming exterior that masked a monstrous soul, made him a compelling figure for both researchers and the media. As time passed, the public's interest in Sells began to wane, but the impact of his crimes continued to resonate. The families of his victims, forever changed by their losses, sought to honor their loved ones' memories by advocating for better support systems for victims of violence and their families. They worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the lasting effects of trauma, emphasizing the importance of mental health resources for those who had experienced violence firsthand. The story of Tommy Lynn Sells ultimately serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can dwell within humanity. His life and crimes evoke a haunting fascination, forcing society to confront the unthinkable realities of serial violence. As the echoes of his victims linger, they serve as a haunting reminder of the lives cut short and the families forever altered by the actions of one man. In the end, Sells became a ghost of his own making, a specter haunting the very land he traversed, forever etching his name alongside the nightmares that echo through the annals of American crime. The legacy of Tommy Lynn Sells is not just a tale of horror, it is also one of survival and resilience. For those whose lives were touched by his violence, the journey toward healing is ongoing. Survivors and advocates continue to work tirelessly to ensure that the stories of victims are not forgotten, that their voices are heard, and that society learns from the chilling lessons of the past. In doing so, they hope to create a future where such acts of violence can be prevented and the cycle of trauma can be broken. The haunting memories of Tommy Lynn Sells may fade with time, but the impact of his actions will resonate for generations to come.